and we didn't talk much about profit margins. So we're going to move on to profit margins. Now, again, you just saw the power of just earnings and sales, and we sliced and diced these numbers. Now I'm going to show you how to really turbocharge this whole thing to the ultimate level, and that is adding profit margins in. So, and I'm going to give you some examples in just a minute, but just let me show you a few stocks here and show you how profit margins also drive the stock price. Taking a look at Apollo. Remember, I showed you how we had these nice strong earnings, and in a bear market where the Nasdaq was down 60%, Apollo went up 850% during that same time. During that same period, the Nasdaq dropped 60%. I mean, that is outperformance at its best. Look at margins: 11.7%, 14, 16, 18.4. So you're not only getting acceleration in the earnings and the sales, you're getting acceleration in the margins. And all of this compounds each other. And I'm going to show you that in just a second. Let's look at Panera Bread, another one that's just amazing relative strength against the market, almost completely inverse. But look at the margins. The margins started at 4.7% back in 2000. Went to 6.5 in 2001, then from 6.5 to 7.8, and then from 7.8 to 8.6. So the margins essentially doubled. They were making double the amount of profits a couple of years later. And again, that was a big part of this big move that, like I said, completely inverse. The Nasdaq during this period was down 80%. Okay, that's not a mistake. 80%. So again, if you think the market is so safe, if you didn't live through this, maybe you might think that. But when you live through a couple of these bear markets, you start to realize that even the Nasdaq, even the Dow or the S&P 500 can go down precipitously and go down for a long period of time, and that it's the market's very dangerous. And but if you're in the right names, it could be very profitable, right? Monster Beverage. Here you go. From 3.3 to 5.4 in 2003, then from 5.4 to 11.3, from 11.3 to 18%. So you went from 3% to 18% margins. Meanwhile, your sales are 20, 63, 93. Well, that's why the earnings are up huge: 75, 214, 195. This is what drives this big price move.
Yeah, and what created those great margins was an introduction of a new product, actually even a new category in drinks with high caffeine drinks, and that's what drove those margins, because the sales just exploded.
Yeah, I can't remember. Dave, do you remember if I talked about the cola market and 7-Up? I can't remember if I might have told that story. If I already told it, pardon me, but I'm going to tell you again. Back when the colas were before 7-Up, 7-Up came up with a brilliant idea. They took out the color of the cola, and they came out with something called the Uncola. 7-Up their slogan was the Uncola. That category did not exist. There was no Uncola. There was colas, and colas were browned. So he took it out, made it clear, called it the Uncola, and created their own category. And again, that's what Monster Beverage did. That's what Coca-Cola did in the I guess it was the 20s, or it was definitely the 30s, but maybe even the 20s. Coca-Cola came out, and Coca-Cola was this great, beverage, this new beverage that took the world or the country by storm. Same thing with Monster Beverage. Nothing different. If you go back and you look at Coca-Cola in the 1930s, it had the earnings. It looked like Monster Beverage. It had the same earnings. It had all the characteristics. Now, I want to show you something. Another light bulb moment here is going to be in these next two examples. So this is a hypothetical little grocery store. It would be a very little grocery store. There's $1 million in revenue. I just put this together just to make an example. It could be anything. But let's look at, I want to show you the power of stacking these the earnings, the sales with the margins, and how it affects earnings in an exponential way, in a compounding fashion. So you have a company, $1 million in revenue, profit margins of 1%. The reason why I said a grocery store, because 1%, grocery stores operate on 1 to 3% margins, very, very low margins. So let's say you got a market cap of 100,000 shares, right? So $1 million times 1% equals 10,000. divided by 100,000 shares, that would be 10 cents per share. If this was a public company, they would have earned 10 cents per share if they made 1% margin. So revenue is now up. Let's say 25% they grow the revenue. Okay, profit margins of 1%. So now you take 1.25 million times 1% equals 12,500 divided by 100,000 shares. You have 12.5 cents of earnings per share, right? Earnings would be up 25%. Margins are the same. So now sales going up 25% are going to increase earnings up 25%. Okay, let's do scenario B now. Now revenue is up 25%, just like in scenario A. We went from 1 million to 1,250,000. However, margins are going to go up just 1%. Okay, we're going to go from 1% to 2%. Now we take that 100,000 shares, 1.25 million times 2% equals 25,000. 100 divided by 100,000 shares is 25 cents per share. Now, instead of having 0.125 cents per share versus 10 cents per share, we've now got 25%, 150% earnings versus 25% earnings. And all we did was move the margins up 1%. Now, mind you, those margins are double. But this is the power of margins, because you can get a company that has 3% margins, and like the case of Monster Beverage, they grew from 3% to almost 19%. That's way more than double, and at a much larger number. So it's you're compounding and you're exponentially growing your earnings when you start growing your sales with expanding margins. And this is where the real power comes in, when you start adding these elements. And this is how a stock can make a huge move. Let me show you a stock that is near and dear to David's heart. Ollie's Bargain is a stock that David and I both bought a number of years back. Actually, we did a master trader program, and David came into town to do the master trader program, and there was not an Ollie's where he lives in California, but there was, right, and there still isn't, and there was one near where I live. So we went to Ollie's and saw the store. Anyway, taking a look at Ollie's came out with some nice numbers right here. This is just a value line sheet. Margins were up 42.6%. Revenue up 16.8%. Earnings were up 50% from 2015 to 2016. Now, those margins went from 4.7 to 6.7. That's just 2%. Okay, but it is a pretty big move. It's 42.6% move in margins, but it's just 2%. They improved their margins by 2%. Now, that revenue of 16.8% produced, with those margins, that margin increase produced a 50% earnings per share. Let's just say that the exact same scenario happened, but they didn't increase those margins by that extra 2%. Well, these are the numbers here. If they kept it at 4.7%, earnings would only be up 7.81%. From 50% to 7.81, all based on just that 2% in margin growth. So you can imagine, what would happen to a company that's growing their revenue and growing their margins like a Monster Beverage. Well, now, what is one of the greatest companies of all time that is one of the greatest growth stories of all time? And now they're calling it the Great Turnaround. You know what that is? You know what that name is? Apple Computer. Why? Because Apple Computer was almost out of business. All right. They were almost under. A lot of people don't realize that Apple was on the balls. I mean, they were almost completely under. They were down to margins that were negligible, actually less than 1%. In 2003, they had 1.2% margins. Look at the growth story here. Look at the margins. They went from 1.2% in 2003. By the time they got to 2011, margins were 23.9%. Oh, a 20-fold increase in margins. And you wonder why Apple is Apple? There it is, right there. When you have the revenue growth and you have And now, of course, this is all driven by new product cycle. They had the iTunes and the iPad, and much of this happened before they ever even had the iPhone. The iPhone was later. iTunes, I think, was the first thing they had, and the products. There was the what was it? The
it was the iPod that first came out in 2003, 2004.
The iPod, yes.
Yeah, the iPhone actually came out in 2007.
And iTunes was iPod, iTunes. I had the chart before. Wait, I think I still. Hold on, let me just see here. I thought I had. Oh, I had the chart earlier. I think.
But the big thing was in 2007. They brought out. They put a phone onto the iPod, and so you now get an iPhone. That came out in 2007, and then we went through a tough market, and the stock pulled back. But then from there on, it just took off.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find and settle this once and for all here. Let me see. Hold on. What page is it on? I'm sure some of you know this already. Let me just see if I can find it real quick. Hold on. I'm sorry to stall here. Here it is. Here it is. The turnaround situation. So here, Steve Jobs comes back. iPod released here, 2001. iTunes, 2003, and then the iPhone is out here in 2007. Yeah. Right. All right, so let's go back. What page were we just on? I know I'm skipping around here, but sorry about that.
It's like 90 something.
Yeah, profit margins right here. Here we are. Right. So so by the time we got over here, we moved over a couple of years, the margins had already gone up 9 or 10-fold, right? So now the bottom line of all this is what we call the code 3. I call the code 3 matrix. And basically, what I'm trying to ascertain when I'm looking at acceleration, I'm trying to see how attractive the fundamentals are based on looking at the last 3 quarters. Look at the last 3 or 4 quarters, look for the acceleration. And basically, if you've got acceleration in earnings, that's great. If you've got acceleration in earnings and revenue, that's even better. And if you've got acceleration in earnings, revenue, and margins, that's your best scenario. That's what I call the code 33 stock. So what I'm looking for, and these are just rankings, if it would be, if you had 1 quarter of earnings acceleration, that would be one that would be an 11. A 33 would be 3 quarters of all 3. So this is built around what institutions are looking at. A lot of these funds that are quant funds and they're running these these computer models. This is what they're looking at. And they take a long time, like I said, to make these decisions. You could do this analysis very quickly and be getting in that stock at a moment's notice. This isn't going to take very long. And the thing about MarketSmith, one of the reasons MarketSmith, of course, is our sponsor, but I've been using MarketSmith, and I should point out that we've never had anybody else sponsor us, and MarketSmith has never sponsored anyone else. They've never sponsored any outside seminar other than their own O'Neill seminars. So it's we have a liking for both of us. They feel strongly about me. I feel strongly about them. The reason why is because I've been using MarketSmith in one shape or form or another for 30 years. David is instrumental in creating what is in MarketSmith. He was at O'Neill and Company, 3 decades ago, creating all this stuff and creating the going around teaching CanSlim and creating this product before it was even MarketSmith. It was Daily Graphs printed, and then it was Daily Graphs online, and then it went to MarketSmith. As a matter of fact, where are my books here? I had them. I have the books, Dave. I'll show them later on.
Original Daily Graphs.
I got some original Daily Graphs. You must have some laying around too, right?
Yeah.
When we first started doing this, we were using printed books, and the books were weekly. And then throughout the week, we'd have to update the charts by hand with pencil or imagine where the stock price was. I was trading by imagination in the beginning. Like, I didn't even have charts. I had no real-time charts. I was getting the newspaper and then eventually getting daily graphs on the weekend. And then throughout the week, I had to imagine where the price was, and I had to fill it in. I'd write it in with a pencil and kind of draw it in crudely. And then the next week, get the next week and see how close I was. So, very archaic way of doing this. But again, all this is built around the information that you have readily available in MarketSmith, because O'Neill and David and the folks at MarketSmith, they based this all upon how the real world works and boiled it down to the information that you need to focus on that actually influences stock price movements. There's all the problem we have now is you have information overload. There's so much information. You've got to peel back the onion and try to get to what's the real important things to concentrate on. And that's what this whole workshop's about, is to give you those rules and the things that you should. And you might be saying, oh my God, this is so much. Code 3, matrix and earnings and acceleration. It's a lot more straightforward than you think, and it's going to be a lot easier than you think. Once you get involved with this and you start to learn how to do it, it's going to be very quick. You'll have all the information right there, and boom, you'll be able to make these decisions very quickly. Okay, there's another slide here, just some fundamental things to watch. Again, I'm not going to go over this. This is something that you can just look at for yourself. We're going to wrap this up, and we'll be coming back and getting into more of the technicals. There's a lot to go on the technicals. A lot of, I know a lot of you are really eager to see the technical analysis and the price patterns and all that. We've got that. We've got risk management. We're going to be talking about IPOs and all kinds of stuff here. There's way more to go. We're still at a level of, I would say, and maybe just starting to come in on an overhead view, where we still haven't gotten to a really close microscopic view and gotten to the buy points and really analyzing things, fine tuning them. But we're giving you from that satellite down to an aerial, and now we're just starting to come overhead, and we're going to start looking overhead on some of these stocks. Dave, anything to wrap up here as far as fundamentals are concerned?
Well, it's if you want the full picture, you want a stock that technically is acting well, that from a fundamental standpoint is acting well. When you combine those two, it's extremely powerful, and that's where you get some very, very big moves. And when it comes down to it, within a year, you don't have to find 50 of these. If you find 2 or 3 stocks that have these characteristics, and you treat them right, and you make them fairly large positions, you can do extremely well in the market. So it's just boiling 7,000 stocks down to just a handful of stocks that you can do well off of.
Right. And one last thing I want to follow up on, and that's off of what David just said. Whether you're and again, we're moving forward, and everything that we're telling you, nothing changes. If we go forward, we start talking about some new techniques, it's all built on the previous information. So everything's being built upon that. Whether I'm buying for a swing move, a quick trade, or a long-term investment, I'm still requiring all these characteristics. So like Dave said, one stock can change your life. I mean, if you happen to be in a big mover and you get a key leader, coming off of a bear market, and you're in the next Amazon, the next Google, could be life-changing. It can also be life-changing if you find that same stock and you trade it a bunch of times, or you trade a handful of names and you're in very quick moves. But the characteristics are going to be the same. You're looking for the exact same characteristics. Then it's a matter of position management, risk management, all stuff we're going to get into later. So just keep that in mind, that this is going to apply universally across whether you might be thinking, oh my God, I'm a short-term trader. I'm not going for these big giant moves. I'm not holding for years. No, this is not going to apply just to that. It's either whatever your time frame is, this is going to apply. All these rules are going to apply. Okay, so we have so much more to go over. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. You're probably already going, whoa, this is a lot, but we have not even scratched the surface. Some people that have come to the Master Trader Program have said and commented, I've heard this comment quite a few times, it's like drinking from a fire hose. We're bringing a lot at you. It's going to get more and more advanced as we go on. The information is going to come even faster and more sophisticated, and it's going to get more and more advanced. So, we're building here. We're starting off slow, and we're going to accelerate this as we go. So be prepared. There's more to come, and we'll see you in the next session.